follow those charters. And so I noticed those trends. And what I'm noticing is that we've mentioned education, we've mentioned the lack of economic opportunity, we've mentioned the moral and spiritual bankruption that we're noticing in these individuals on a day-to-day. I find that there's a lack of synergy in addressing these issues with the various institutions that are tasked with addressing these issues, right? And so you have the lack of resources, because that's the first part, right? And oftentimes the victims of these particular crimes of violence, whether it be domestic violence, whether it be dating violence, whether it be violence on our streets, in our neighborhoods, what I find is they're in our poorer communities, right? And unfortunately, they're black and brown individuals. And what is consistent in those situations? The lack of resources. We notice it in domestic violence. We notice it with violence that happen on the streets. And so we don't have the resources, or we're not investing and providing opportunities in addressing these different aspects where we're morally, culturally, educationally, spiritually bankrupt. And we really have to have those tough discussions. But also, there's a generational divide that we have right now, right? All due respect, look at the room. Look at the age of the individuals in this room, right? And so a lot of the individuals that I see that come across my desk, they get younger and younger. And so we have to address that issue in our communities, where we have some communities, we'll take money from the rapper that we know that's causing all the trouble in our neighborhoods. We'll look away, but know that they're causing all the trouble in our neighborhoods, right? We're complicit in that, right? And so we have to have that tough discussion as well amongst ourselves.
I don't want to go after him. It's so good. As the licensed clinician on the panel, I love talking about mental health. It's my go-to, it's my bread and butter. But I do want us to make sure that we are not conflating acts of violence with and correlating it with mental illness. People who are mentally ill are not more likely to be perpetrators of violence. They're actually more likely to be victims of violence because they are a vulnerable population. And when we blame mental illness for violent actions, we further stigmatize mental illness, which is why people don't want to get the help that they need to get. There's so many contributing factors to why violence continues to perpetuate in a cycle in our neighborhoods. And Lauderhill is near and dear to my heart because I grew up in the 5519 Elza, right? Sandal Grove and Dog Carlos. And I lived a little bit of time in Inverary, but we don't talk about that time. And so it means something to me when we have events like this to really address the issues that, like, I wish I had had as a child. I wish that when I grew up, I don't know if you know much about 55th and 19th Street, but there was a corner store over there where some things happened, and I lived in the neighborhood right behind that. So I grew up submerged in the violence that was happening during that time. I drive through now and I try to show my kids my hood, and they're like, "Mommy, people are walking dogs and jogging." I'm like, it's my hood. It meant something to me to be able to grow up in that neighborhood where I felt a cultural connection in so many different ways. And one of the major contributing factors to violence is the cultural normalization of it. We are normalizing certain behaviors over and over again. And when we have young children growing up, we blame kids a lot and we talk down about the generations younger than us, but they have to learn those behaviors from somewhere. They don't just become these people all on their own and all by themselves. And so what are they learning? Who is teaching them? And who are they taking on as icons? Because I pride myself with being able to say I went to a certain school and I lived in a certain neighborhood and I was able to go beyond what was expected of me in those neighborhoods, right? But how much of us who have gone beyond that go back and mentor and teach and guide those youth? Or do we feel like, you know what, I've made it now and I don't need to go back and do anything else in that type of community?
So I want to go back to something real quick, and I'm I'll come back to you, but before it escapes me, something you were saying, Bishop, in regards to the church playing a role. And the church very much is a real important part of our lives, particularly in communities of color and more specifically in African American communities. How do you see from your experience roles that need to be played, or what needs to be educated? I mean, how does our spiritual community, our houses, our worship homes of, if you will, our churches, our synagogues, but speaking very specifically to African Americans in this country, how do you see the church? What role do the church need to take on? What does it need to implement, and how does it do that if it still doesn't have the insight to recognize that it has its own flaws and its inability to even see that there's a real problem that needs to be addressed?
That's an interesting question, and to answer a couple of parts there is simply the church in a whole must view themselves not just like a pastor view himself as a pastor for the church in the community. He must see himself as a pastor in the community where the church is. It's a difference. He's pastoring the community that the church is, not just where the church is, and comes and goes. And so that issue, that concept of the church's involvement, if I may, I just wrote my second book. It's called Avoda, and it deals with the entire connection between the church from a doctoral position and research. It deals with how the church, that very question you asked, how we see ourselves and participating. Now, when the state office is closed, the police department, and they're never closed, and city halls are closed, and other places, the church doors are still open. And people come crying. When all is said and done, and the death, I just buried a 20-year-old boy, buried him in the city. Young, just talented kid. Called out of his house. His friends met him and shot him in front of the house. Just a few feet away from our church. Again, here is another school. We're in all the schools, in the malls, we're in the swap shop. We're on the ground. So when all the philosophical and psychological ideas have been implemented, we have to get to work because we deal with the ground roots of people's lives and death and struggles and challenges. So the question, how do we? First of all, that our mayor, city officials, and of course our chief of police, Constance, is here. We are in constant dialogue, finding how can we bridge this gap between this church and the state. How do we work together? What things can we do? How can we find ways to navigate through these areas? We've invited the city to come in. We've done this, Rashid Bait, and we had brought all the youths in to the church during the summertime, and we say, here is the program. I've designed a program since I was in Chicago called FEAST, F-E-A-S-T, Families Eating and Studying Together, just to get them off the street. We bring chefs in, we have educators come, retired teachers coming at our church in the evenings and getting kids off the streets and educating them. Now, one of the ways that the city can help the church is funding. Now, if we can get funds to do this, we have the volunteers waiting to get this done. We feed close to about 50,000 people per year, just getting them off the streets, getting kids. But to answer the question, not to take much time, what is the key right now is mentorship and reverse mentorship. Meaning, we've seen, as our attorney said, look at with due respect, the age group here. People who are retired, moving to Florida, moving to communities, need things to do. Get them involved. Programs that they can give their time and serve. And get the young people to connect with them. A wealth of knowledge, experience, and just giving their ability a responsibility, getting them off the street. A church, I don't see the church as a Sunday morning worship experience only. I see it as a daily living experience where we can connect with people on a daily basis. So collaborating, helping to fund, being a part of what our community needs, and getting the people to come in to say, here, how can I help? And that's what I think. The police, the law enforcement, the municipalities, any entity that is willing to offer help to our programs, mentorship, the church doors, the faith community doors should be open all the time, doing something, even if it's small, that offers help to the society. If not, we need to revamp the whole process of our religious and faith communities who only want to sing and shout on Sundays, but the doors are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays. That needs to be revamped. It has to be revamped.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the panel pretty much covered the first question, but I'll say the operative word is cycles. And so we're not only looking at the lack of economic opportunity, but we're looking at generational poverty. We're not just looking at mental health issues, we're looking at historical untreated trauma. And we're not just looking at, lack of synergistic collaboration amongst agencies that do these services, but we're looking at systemic neglect. These things don't operate in a vacuum. Many of the people who are victims of violence, that are perpetrating violence, have a combination of these things that they're encountering, all that fuel the violence that we're seeing in our community.
That kind of takes me to the next question here. And that's the generational violence, right? And how do generational trauma and family dynamics contribute to this ongoing cycle?
So at the mic, I guess I'd say that what goes unprocessed gets passed down, right? We don't talk to our family members, we don't talk within our community. And so if you're not taught about how to facilitate safety and healing, you recreate what you know, even if what that recreation is violence itself, whether it's harming yourself or other people.
Kids do what we do, not what we say. We model for our kids and our family members every single day. We can talk to them blue in the face. They're only going to do what they see. And one thing that I'm proud of here in the city of Lauderhill is that Chief Stanley, myself, Harold, the mayor, we have a mentorship program. Mentoring, I'm telling you, it is so, so important. We have a mentorship program where we have partnered with every agency across this county. And believe me, we have saved hundreds of kids. In Chief Stanley's office, when we first started, we had at least 25 police officers that were mentors for our program. And what they do is they handle these kids one-on-one. They do one-on-one mentoring. And I cannot tell you, it's been going on now for 13 years, and I can't tell you how many kids that we have saved because of putting our hands on them. And I would be remiss if I sit here and then I ask everybody in here, we're taking mentors every day. And everybody in here, we would appreciate, because we have a lot of kids and we don't have enough people that's willing to put that time in. Because I'm telling you, 5 minutes, 15 minutes a day makes a world of difference in the life of a child. For me, every black kid in Broward County is my child. And we have to treat it as such. And we have to make sure that we put in the right people in place that's going to touch our kids too. And that starts with our education system, and I'll leave that right there.
The government, I think this is your area of expertise. But look, I'd like to focus on the practical aspect, right? How do we break the generational cycle? I think events like this, I want to applaud Mary Grant. I want to applaud Chief Stanley. Chief Stanley is one of the few chiefs. We have 31 municipalities in this county. She's one of the few chiefs that will call me as she sees the trends developing in different areas of crime. And she's proactive, right? And so we need a collaborative effort, once again, with all our stakeholders and institutions, education, services like Women in Distress, the church, to combat this cycle of violence. And we need priorities. And I alluded to this earlier. We need better priorities morally, culturally, within our communities, but also with resources in our local governments. We don't need another Jazz in the Gardens, right? The funding that you use for these different events and social events to have people here, use those events to help with helping these children with their cognitive development that they're missing at home, right? Use that funding to bring those kids into venues like this with mental health professionals to help their families to reverse this cycle. Use the funding to help with educating these families on the effects that all these things are having on them mentally, spiritually, and physically, right? And so I think this is a great start, right? If we use our funding and our resources smartly, and we prioritize situations like this to better educate our community and our children, we can reverse that cycle. But we have to be deliberate in it, right? And I'm not throwing shade at anybody. I'm sorry, but look, I'm a frustrated prosecutor. I'm dealing with too much death. I get cases from BSO. I get cases from all our other entities, Lauderhill, all our cities, and Broward County. And the deaths and the perpetrators, the suspects, they're getting younger and younger. And then when it gets to me, it's too late. Criminal justice system isn't designed to give people second chances. That's out of the grace and kindness that God has put in my heart. I'm the chief law enforcement officer in this county, and I'm here to tell you the system is not designed to help you once you get in trouble. And so when you come to me protesting about me charging a 15-year-old adult because he killed somebody, it's too late. You should have been at the local city commission meeting. You should have been in those budget meetings that are long and arduous and boring, seeing when that money is being allocated towards. You should have been at the school board meeting when they were talking about allocating funds for mental health services. But when the little kid commits an adult crime and kills somebody and takes someone's life, you want to come to my office and protest me because we didn't do our job as a society. You don't have to like me after this. I don't have to be state attorney. It's fine. My calling is to change the system to protect each and every one of you. And so, call it tough love. I don't care, but it's the truth because I see the reality of it. I see it every day, and I see where we're missing the mark as a community on the front end. We worry too much about the back end. We worry too much about what's in the media, but we're worried about the outcome, but we're not worried about what happens before we get to the outcome. And that's what we're lacking as a community.
Every time he speaks, I'm like you. I'm like, I don't want to go, like, because there's nothing else to say. So here's what I'll say. I will say just a couple things. You asked about what creates that, and we talked about trauma. So what you need to understand about trauma, we talk about it, we use it, the word is kind of flipped around a lot. People are like, oh, I'm traumatized. This is deep-seated, systematic, day after day trauma that you cannot slip out of that rewires your brain, folks. I'm telling you, trauma, like the deep systematic trauma that we see, rewires the way that your brain works. And then that rewires the kids' brain. No joke right now, we're seeing about a 30% increase in teen dating violence awareness, or teen dating violence, 30%. So the things that are now, the adults that come to me now are, the kids that are in the system now are gonna be my clients in 5 years. Because we can't get on top of it. To the point of the panel, what are we doing to make sure that we're keeping our kids safe from the things they're seeing on the internet? When these kids come out of the womb, we are handing them the tools to see things that they will never unsee. We are showing them a side of life that is not realistic. And then we as parents, and luckily my kids bridge the gap between before and after social media. I pray for y'all every day. Because there's nothing, social media has really changed the way we communicate. But at the end of the day, it's on us.
right? We have classes, we do technology, we do whatever we can do, but at the end of the day, if your child comes to me and I show them this dysfunction and then you hand it right back to them, they're now going to be my survivors, and I'm now trying to figure out how to get them out of a domestic violence relationship 9 times, right? So that trauma, that begins then. That's when that begins, and that's how they get to us.
I perked up when I heard trauma conversation start because that's my jam. When we talk about intergenerational trauma, it goes beyond only when they come out of the womb. It starts even before. It starts in the womb. One of the things that in Black and Brown communities we don't really consider enough because we're so busy surviving is how much we've inherited from the generations before us. And we are inheriting intergenerational trauma and passing it on through the womb in ways that we are not even able to have the capacity to really address because our system is not set up to be trauma informed or trauma responsive. We're trauma reactive. We wait until the things happen. We wait until they get to his desk. We wait until we're in the crisis to go to the church to cry about it. But we're not putting enough preventative strategies in place to break the cycles and create healing. Because the same way we are inheriting intergenerational trauma, we can start passing on intergenerational healing. And that is a phenomenal thing when families come to the realization that, like, it stops with me. I'm not doing that to my children because I'm making it. There's some studies that have been done that's called the epigenetics of trauma, and this is where it gets like really scientific. So I'm gonna explain it as simple as I can. But individuals who have been traumatized in the past have passed on genetic markers in our body that has changed the way that our genes function. And I don't know about y'all, but I didn't think that deeply about like why I turned out a certain type of way. But and even though I'm a mental health clinician, the best way to explain it is, how many of y'all have the illness in your family that is the family illness that gets passed on from generation to generation? Well, one of the things we have to consider is where was that rooted and how did it even begin? And I use my mother's grandmother as an example because in our families, we all know somebody with hypertension. We all know somebody with diabetes. We all know somebody with, sugar, as we call it. But we know somebody that has these medical illnesses, and we understand that when we have this family history, we do preventative things for our own selves to prevent ourselves from getting those illnesses. So that my dad has hypertension, I need to eat right and exercise so I don't got blood pressure issues, right? We're not considering how much that also relates to mental health issues that we are also passing on. And I use my mother's grandmother as an example because my mother's grandmother was the daughter of a slave. That wasn't that far ago. That wasn't that far back. I knew her within my lifetime. To know that I knew somebody whose parents were enslaved means that history wasn't as far, ain't as black and white as they like us to think, right? But I think about what was the diet of her parents? What did their diet look like? What were they given? Not what did they have access to? What were their resources? And why did my family develop hypertension? Because of the nature of their diet. And now it gets passed on from generation to generation, and we just kind of take it as the family norm. But we've also been taking our trauma as family norm. Because that's just the way we are, and that's just how our family runs, and that's just how we operate. There's so many things that we've normalized as family behavior, as community behaviors, as system behaviors that we're not realizing are changing the epigenetics of future generations. And when we think about why the kids are coming out the way they are, well, we've already changed the markers in their genes. So what other choice do they have unless we stop the cycle and end it with us?
Thank you. That brings me to, as a clinical psychologist trained at the University of Miami, and it takes me back to to a period of time I was doing clinical work. And here's what we do know, and you're not going to hear very much about. The transatlantic slave trade, generations coming across that ocean, where our bodies endured a great deal of stressors, became those genetic markers you're talking about. So over time, and it's very interesting how in the African American community we suffer with a high rate of hypertension. I mean, you're just genetically predisposed. You can exercise, you can eat well, you can do all those things, but we still may be subject to taking medications or something. Still may be a struggle. We deal with a great deal of depression merely because of the country that we have lived in for hundreds of years and what it has imposed upon us mentally, psychologically, physically, etc. So those are things that we need to be aware of. We need to think about and understand the etiology of maybe where some of this disease comes from. But here's something else that is very important, is that the most critical time for a child is between birth and 3 to 4 years of age. And I think most of us that are mental health trained understand that. In the brain itself, from the time that child is born, your brain develop what we refer to as where there's neurotransmitters that create energy, electricity in the brain, and as the brain cells grow from the time of birth up to 3 or 4 years of age, if we do not hold, cuddle, cool, love a child in those very early years, there is a window that will close. And once that window closes, it never opens back up. What does that look like when that window closes because a child has not been caressed, loved, nurtured, cooed, talked to, those things very early? Because they need that in order for their brain cells to develop. And if that is not there, those cells would not develop in the brain. You ever notice when many of the children you're talking about, state attorney, that comes into the hearing and they stand there 14, 15 years of age, they just killed everybody on the block and they act like nothing bothered them? That is real. Because what happens, they never develop, many of them never develop that ability to have empathy and learn empathy and feel empathy because that window closed. Now, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world for them. It just means that they behaviorally now are going to have to learn how to adapt and survive in this environment. That makes it extremely hard. Now, I didn't mean to get in that deep of the science of it, but I think it's important for us to understand that the beginning of a lot of our mental health goes way beyond some of these superficial things that we talk about. But here's the next question I want to pose to you all that I think is critically important in this. What are some of the signs and symptoms that may go unattended to that might be clear indicators and markers to us that someone is struggling with some type of trauma from where you have, from y'all experience?
I'm going to use myself as an example. We have to be honest, like I said, with ourselves about who we are. When I was younger, I was diagnosed with ADHD and OCD. And back then, I'm going to go ahead and say how old I am, I'm 72. Back then, the only thing they could do is give you a pill, right? Give you something, and Ritalin is, that's something I hate. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But by the grace of God, I had a grandmother who said you're not giving my kids any kind of medication because I was in Mississippi, is because she was probably scared that they were going to give me something to kill me. But anyway, that's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. She decided that she was going to take care of my hyperactivity and all those other things herself. And what she did was, and to this day, I am addicted to education. Because what she did was, she took me to the library, made me sit down and read books. And that was to get me to focus. And as a result of that, and all of the time she put in, I became a straight-A student with all of my issues. So what I'm saying is, we have to, first of all, be honest with who our kids are and take the necessary measure to get them the help they need. Now, back to your question at first. Yes, all of the pre-stuff is so important, but this is where we are now. We've got to come up with some type of antidote to help our kids where we are now. Because it's great to understand it, but if we don't do anything about it, and we don't put the time in with our kids and help our law enforcement, help our sheriff, and help everybody. I had 17 brothers, and they weren't by all my mothers, okay? And half of them was on this side of the law, and the other half was on this side. So I understand all of that. So it comes down to us making the decision to do something about it all together.
I would add to that we often pay attention to individuals who quote unquote act out, right? So it's the kid that's screaming, acting up in school that we pay attention to, but we don't often pay attention to the kids that are withdrawing. And we may look at it as though, oh, they're just a quiet person, they're to themselves. But when Dr. Lindo talked about the rewiring of the brain, when early childhood trauma happens, it's, that their brain has been rewired for survival and not connection. And so that's important to pay attention to, when the kids are withdrawing, it's not just because they're quiet or they're just, to themselves. It could just be that they don't have the ability to form connections given their trauma. And then on the flip side of that are people who overperform, people pleasers. That's a sign that goes unnoticed, right? It's not that they're so nice and always bubbly. It's that my survival instinct is that if I'm overperforming and I'm kind to someone, then maybe that the trauma that did happen won't happen again. So that's kind of what I would add to that.
My wife is a third grade teacher. These conversations happening in my home every day. When I was working my master's in Chicago, one of the research that came out of the University of Chicago is that by the time a child is at the age of 4th grade, I should say, 4th grade, you can determine based on their scores whether they're going to be in the juvenile system from that very research in 4th grade. And that really caused me to move on to do my doctoral degree as well, because I wanted to find out if I'm going to be in the faith community, what am I saying to the families, the homes I have to deal with? We can, everyone has their part to play, or attorney and leaders, but the home is which I deal with every day. I deal with the home, the trauma and the drama. They're together, the trauma and the drama. Late nights calls, people in prison have to stand up in the police department or in the prison with parents. Here is a daughter just shoplifted and is locked up. And so these are real issues. And in dealing with the home, I believe where the root cause of these things are. It's such an intricate responsibility, because I believe if the home is messed up, it flows into every other area of society when the homes are messed up. And that's a place that really needs a lot of attention, a lot of prayer. Our men, there needs to be forums where men are gathered to how to be better fathers, husbands, boys, before they become, a sperm donor. They believe that that's a man, but they're just a sperm donor, not a father. They try to find them, attracting them to pay child support for a child or a single mom in the church or somewhere who is coming every Sunday alone. And so these are the challenges we face. And so if I may, I target the family as much as I can with all the help and resources. I would love to bring this panel in my church every Sunday for the next 6 weeks. But just to be able, because we are able to have people's attention, fathers, husbands, wives, children, the whole family together. And as Returning was saying, not just an adult crowd, but their entire families are there. And I think it's time that we have discussions like these that addresses the entire family. I wish it was a family forum where we have the fathers and mothers here, the kids are somewhere with a child psychologist, and somebody else is talking to grandma. And I mean, it's a holistic approach that we can really get to the root of this thing and the causation of what it means and bring a proper solution to the entire family. Once we get the families where they need to be in, God help us, I believe we will see a different transformation in our society and our culture.
This is a good point on that one. My mom went to go, and I remember a couple years ago, I read a study, and all of you probably heard of it or seen reports on the study. There's a direct correlation to criminality or delinquent behavior to literacy rates, or the lack thereof, right? And it's true, and so we have a good friend here, Winsome Green back here. She's passionate. Whenever I'm free, whenever she has her literacy workshops, I go. One thing that I do, and I don't say it publicly, but I'll say it, a lot of people don't know it, but I'll sometimes spend one day a week, I'll randomly pick an elementary school, and I'll go read to an elementary school class. I don't have social media people with me or whatever because it's important to me. I didn't learn how to read. I'm a lawyer. I went to law school, believe it or not. Went to law school, I'm a lawyer, but I didn't learn how to read until the 4th grade, right? And I grew up in a neighborhood where there was crime rampant all throughout. I have friends that are in prison. I have friends that are dead right now to this day. And there is a direct correlation to literacy or lack thereof. And I'll give you this practical aspect because I deal with things on the back end. Before I send someone in prison, before I send someone to the Florida State Prison, before a judge sentences them to prison or we have agreed resolution, there has to be something called a pre-sentencing investigation, PSI. Or whenever we consider putting someone or pursuing the death penalty in a particular case, my office will allow defense attorneys to submit mitigation packets. You know, one of the constant things that are in those mitigation packets that I've noticed, and I'm not a clinical psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I don't have a PhD, right? I haven't studied this, but an overwhelming majority of those pre-sentencing investigations before we send a black man to prison, before a judge is sentencing that individual to prison, or before we decide to pursue the death penalty on a particular case, one of the constant things is the individual is illiterate, or the literacy rate is low amongst those individuals. And so that should be a priority. It's not just enough that they're reading at grade level. Our goal should be, we should have our children reading 2, 3, 4, 5 grade levels ahead of where they should be reading. And so it's important for us, we need to spend time and read with our children. That's not the only problem, and I'm not saying that. Just because you can't read, that doesn't mean that you're going to commit a crime. That doesn't mean that's the problem with the criminal justice system. What I'm saying is that it's a culmination of a lot of things that are lacking that I'm noticing, right? And so we should prioritize that. We need to prioritize programs like Ms. Green's program and other programs. We need to read to our children, and we need to take away the tablets. So, one of the most important things to being a parent, I think also being a friend, is time, affection, and love. Sometimes we overlook or understate the importance of time. If you're at home and you're on your phone all the time and scrolling through your phone or scrolling through your tablet and watching TV and not paying attention to your child, that's affecting them, right? Because then it goes to, I need to feel accepted. I need to feel wanted. I'm not getting that from home, so I'll join the local street gang, or I'll do things to try to get acceptance from my friends, to be cool. And so time, affection, that was just addressed earlier, love, combined with us developing priorities to give resources to affect the issues that we see that are affecting our community, I think it could be a great first start. But it's little things like this, like reading, literacy, time, affection, love. Those go a long way. And I see that it's lacking with the demographic that I come across every day. And so that's my point on that. And those are trends that I'm noticing on mine.
Thank you. I want to ask maybe one more question here, and then I'd like to move it to the audience, because I know the audience always have a lot of great questions and inquiries to make to such a wonderful group as you have here on stage. But and my last question is, best that you can, how do you think recent changes in federal legislation and presidential orders impact the number of non-citizens and undocumented persons seeking assistance? Because these people, pretty much people of color, who are being impacted by these changes, they're going to find their ways, sir, to the DA's office, state attorney's office. They're going to find they're going to find a path that we're all of us that are in this business, if you will, are going to come in contact with those young people. But what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Dr. Parker, whoever want to go first.
So, one of the major issues that I come across when I do presentations and community work is the barriers to access to care that so many individuals have. And these barriers look like a lot of different things. For some people, it's financial barriers. We talk a lot about time and affection and love, but some parents don't have it to give because they're working, and they're working 2-3 jobs, and it's not that they don't want to care about their kids. But I don't know about y'all, but I'm from the islands. My parents showed they cared by paying for us to live in that home, by taking care of us financially, and that was their affection and love. It was the prioritization of just trying to survive. And so the barriers are so immense. Transportation barriers, time barriers, just even language barriers. Yes, I'm going to go to that agency to get help, but can they understand me? Because some of us can code switch. I can turn this off. I can't talk like this for the rest of the time. And some of us have that ability and that skill, but some people don't. Some people cannot navigate the systems of care in order to get the help the way they need to. And when we have systemic things happening in our country, that creates further barriers. A lot of people who are undocumented are already fearful of the systems of care. I've definitely referred times to go to the emergency room, go to the ER, and they go, I can't do that, ICE will come and get me. And a couple of years ago, I was really big and bold and saying, no, ICE can't get me from a hospital. There's HIPAA laws. They can't tell people you're there, and they can't tell people your legal status in this country. I'm not that big and bold to say that in our current circumstances. I had a family member call my mother this week to say that her children's father went in for his hearing, his legal immigration hearing. My cousin was waiting in the parking lot for him for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours. And luckily, the immigration officer was kind enough to call the mother and say, hey, they got him. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was following what he needed to follow, what he was told to do. And right now, we don't know where he is. We don't know when he will go home. And we don't know if he will be sent home. Because so many people are being sent to countries that aren't even theirs. And so when stories like that happen to families like mine, why would we seek help? Why would we go get care? Why would I want my name on anybody's paperwork to be tracked? And we can offer as much services as we want, but we also have to understand that we are living in the shadow of fear. And there's so many people in our community. I don't know about y'all, but I'm gonna be real. I love living in Lauderhill because it is Jamaica town. Like it was to me growing up. I know I can go right there by Lauderhill Mall and I can get a Jamaican beef patty. And I can get a cocoa bread, and I know that this is where I can access my culture. Ketos used to be out there on 441, but he's moved now. But when I want my jerk chicken, I know I can go to Ketos and get my jerk chicken. And so there's so many people that are living in this community who are from my island, from other islands, from Latino communities that are living in fear. We can offer as many services as we want, but are they going to want to put their name on paper for somebody to track them?
I'm just trying to be as good as I can be because I know this is being broadcast. So here's the situation, folks. What's going on right now with immigration is going to get survivors killed of domestic violence. It's going to get people killed because people are afraid to come and seek our services. They're afraid to be in our shelter. They're afraid to come and talk to us. They want to know whether or not ICE can get on my campus. They can't. They want to know all of the things to try to keep them safe. And at the end of the day, I can't promise them that. I can't promise that if we take you to court to file an injunction, the ICE isn't going to be waiting outside the courthouse to pick you up. I can't promise that when I pay to move you into housing, right, because that's my job. My job is stabilization. My job is to help you prepare for a new life without violence. I can't promise you that. I might be able to promise you a life without violence, but I can't promise you that you're not going to get picked up by ICE out of this house I just paid 10 grand to put you in. This is a crisis level situation, folks, a crisis level situation for us in South Florida and in Broward especially. Because we have some of the highest domestic violence numbers in the state, in the country. Lauderhill is number 1 in the county. That's why we're doing things with the sheep, like instituting a new mobile advocacy response unit that we're going to have on the ground here, that will be on the ground here as a pilot program. But it's not going to solve the immigration issue. And it's not going to solve the fact that when we dispatch out to people's houses, we're going to have to really talk to them about their options in a real, firm way. And not sugarcoat it. Because we can't do that anymore. We can't do it. So if this doesn't change, men and women are going to die in the streets because they will be afraid to come here. We already have cases happening here. Right now, domestic violence cases, people getting killed because they were afraid to come forward. So that's how it impacts us. That's how it impacts our ability to provide services. It's doing the same thing for other nonprofits in the community.
I want to thank you, great point, because we deal with that on a day-to-day and what we deal with, and I want to provide a legal perspective to this as well. Once again, I'm the biggest fan of Chief Constance Stanley. I mean that she's probably one of the more thoughtful, across the board, one of the more thoughtful head of law enforcement agencies in the state and probably in the county, right? Because she's forward thinking. She saw an issue that we saw on our end, on the prosecution side, right? We noticed that there's a language barrier with certain communities, right? As we all know, members of our Haitian communities, they speak Creole, right? As opposed to certain other Caribbean countries that English, right? You speak English, right? And there was a language barrier where individuals from our Haitian communities would come and get resources, but no one could communicate, right? There wasn't documentation, there wasn't pamphlets, there wasn't anything that they could read and communicate to our office and feel comfortable that we were going to be there for them. And that was in law enforcement in general. But also, not just with our Haitian communities, when you have our South American countries, our Central American countries, when you're here and you might be undocumented, your abuser may exhibit a certain position of power over you, right? Well, you don't speak the language. Well, you're going to get deported if you call the police office. Yeah, you're going to get deported if you cooperate with the state attorney's office or the prosecution office. And they're controlling the funds, they're controlling every aspect of their lives, and so these victims are afraid to come forward. And so we work with Chief Stanley, we continue to work with them now, and the city of Lauderhill and other cities as well, to address that, to erase that stigma. And also there are legal tools that you can utilize. We have U visas, we have T visas. So if you cooperate, if you're a victim of a crime, and if you cooperate, you have the opportunity to apply for those particular visas, right? And so it'll affect your status in a positive way. And so those are tools that are out there that we have to do a better job at educating our communities about, so they understand that there are tools and resources for them that won't affect their status, and they can be bold and they can stand up to these aggressors and their abusers. But once again, it goes back to what I said earlier. It goes back to resources. It goes back to us investing those resources, but also educating our community members that these resources are available, but also creating a space where they can utilize those resources, right? If I'm working 2-3 jobs, I don't have time to do that, right? And so it goes to economic opportunity, educational opportunity. And so it's going to take a concerted effort from our governmental agencies, business partners, community partners coming together and creating those opportunities for members in our community.
It wouldn't be me if I didn't say this. Your vote counts. Your vote counts. This time around, 2026, we need to vote like our life depended on it, because it does. We can stop some of the things that are happening if we put the right people in place that will do that for us. Harold, for instance, listening to you lets me know that you have the right consciousness for our community and the fact that we can work with you. We need to get to know forums like this. Mayor Grant, thank you. This is the first one of this magnitude that I've been to or participated in that had the people that actually signed on the front of the check. You know, my grandfather would say, anytime you sign on the back of the check instead of the front of the check, you don't run nothing but your mouth. So at the end of the day, we have access to the people that actually sign on the front of the check. If nothing else, please register to vote. And one last thing, and I'm going to shut up. Let me just say this. We are all in this together. I don't care what your nationality is. I don't care who you are. We are all in this together. It is so bad with the immigration thing, and I said it to be funny, but I'm thinking about tattooing on my neck my birthday and where I was born. That's how serious this thing is. I know it sounded funny, but this is real serious for our families.
Thank you very much. Let's give everybody, let's give them all a round of applause, please. What a dynamic group. We're out of time. And I want to be respectful of your time and the panel's time and the mayor, who I know need to go back and do the great work you're doing. But what I want to do before we end this session is to really just stand up. Let's give the mayor a round of applause for bringing this to us. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Thank all of you, and thank all of you, this fantastic panel. And I'm going to turn it back over to. Do we still have time for a couple of questions? Okay, there we go. The mayor said 3, so let's start over here. Go right ahead. Here, take this mic.
Sorry, I wrote it down. Thank you guys again, and sorry but thank you for your time. I wanted to say, as you know, domestic violence is complex and often it exists in a gray area. In my experience, cases involving multi-layers of abuse are frequently pushed aside and mishandled. I'm a domestic violence survivor. There's a significant disconnect between agencies when navigating these dynamic situations. What are concrete steps to ensure that agencies are working together to protect victims? I know there was a lot of discussion on ICE. I actually suffered abuse at the hands of an immigrant, and I've been advocating for myself, and I came here today and took off the work because I'm going to stand up and continue advocating for myself. This individual was released from Chrome. I was not told he was released from Chrome, and I'm scared for my life. So I'm here today to see what steps are you guys doing to connect with these ICE agencies to ensure that, and on the opposite end, victims of abuse are protected. Yes.
One thing real quick, are you safe right now? Because if you know, because you got resources in this room right now. Your chief is here, the mayor's office here. Are you safe right now? Okay? I want to make sure you are before we go any further in this. All right. You sure? Okay, because you got resources here right now at this very moment. Okay? All right.
That's what I was going to say. And I was also going to say something else. So it takes a lot to stand up in front of a room of people that you don't know. And it's an ongoing problem. And I just want to say thank you so much for putting your heart out there because it's hard to do. I'm going to add this in the room. So if you need somebody to talk to, please, when we're over with this, I will get you with someone. Okay? So, to the point about shoring up and working with groups. So right now, Harold Pryor's office and I have a state SAO grant that his office and our office kind of helped. I don't want to take a bunch of credit because his staff did most of the work. In order to increase prosecution rates and in order to bring about change. Because I'm here to tell you, we are drowning in domestic violence cases, and I recognize that we are not doing enough, and so we're doing more. We have the mobile advocacy unit that's going to start here in a couple weeks, where we're going to come out to houses. We're going to meet you where you are when the domestic abuse happens. We're going to get you resources right away. As it comes to the ICE issue, I had one of the worst cases I've ever had in domestic violence, which is saying a lot, about 3 months ago with someone who was not documented. I'm not above calling down to the county and say, hey, so this dude's here and he has a removal order and let's just get him removed. Like it's just like, can you remove him? Can you call? And, you know, right now where ICE is at, we can call and they're going to come to the jail and pick him up, right? They're going to come. So if that's the case that you're in right now, then we should talk after this. But when I tell you we are triangulating everything we can do, the BSO's office, Lauderhill PD, the state attorney's office, everybody is focused on this issue in a triangulation, and I would love to chat with you more afterwards, just to make sure that you're okay.
And thank you for your question, and that is a thoughtful question, and that is a problem that we have in the criminal justice system. A lack of communication between our federal partners and local level. As you understand, it's federal and state. And it's interesting enough, our legislature, they've passed these tough on immigration laws, and they're asking state actors, state agencies to act and essentially to exhibit or utilize their power as an immigration arm of the federal government, but they haven't given us the resources or tools to enforce these laws that they've passed, right? And so right now what we have is the federal government, the state government, they're trying to figure out how do we have an interface or how do we have communication on dealing with these particular issues. And so oftentimes we have these problems, these issues where, yes, we might have a state law issue with the domestic violence situation and the perpetrator is in ICE custody, and for some reason or another, that individual is no longer in ICE custody. There's no mechanism where it is adequately communicating to the local agencies or informing us what's going on so we can better inform you as a victim. And so those are loopholes, those are things that we're working on in the criminal justice system to better communicate, to better have those intercommunications between our agencies. And we try to stay on top of all these things. That's why we apply for grants. That's why we have partnerships with women in distress in our various law enforcement agencies. But also it's on our law enforcement agencies. We got to treat domestic violence issues as serious. Because this is a cultural and religious thing. No disrespect to the bishop. I'm from the church. I got family members in church. But you don't need to stay in that marriage if he's beating up on you. And we have to stop encouraging that. Right? And then on another end, we just have to be, as a culture, I hate it and I cringe when we read things, and it's not an issue here in Lauderhill because they have a deliberate and concerted effort to get after this because Chief Stanley is thoughtful. She's ahead of things. She's trying to figure out solutions to problems. But we have other agencies where we get reports where they'll come up with, it's nothing. We'll write up the report, we'll move on, or people will report it, they'll submit it, and they don't do anything on it, and then someone comes up dead. And we have hundreds and thousands of those situations. And so we need to prioritize in our law enforcement agencies to take these issues seriously, investigate these issues seriously, look at them thoroughly, so we can adequately do our jobs, right? And we have to have resources and create mechanisms so you can feel safe and comfortable to come forward. And you have, it shows you have strength, you have resolve. And I want you to know, everybody in this room, we stand with you. We're going to stand behind you. We got your back. So thank you for asking that thoughtful question. Thank you for having the strength to do that, because that's an issue that we are addressing, and we need people like you, my dear, to speak up and to point out these loopholes, to point out these gray areas, so we can hold our legislators in Tallahassee, we can hold them accountable to actually do their job, pass laws that actually matter, that's actually going to make change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's take one or two more questions here real quick.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so encouraged to see this. I'm a newbie here in Lauderhill. This is home after 31 years in New York City. And I work very closely with several mayors with the situation of domestic violence in the Latino community. What I saw that made a difference in the Bronx, where I come from, was that we tackled the issue, the generational curse of domestic violence in the school system, providing the children with tools for mindfulness, ways of them putting words to their emotions, and then what we saw was 64% decrease in bullying, in addition to the parents then wanting to get involved in learning what it is their kids were learning on how to handle when they were angry. So I wonder if Lauderhill is open to exploring other options, including things that have worked in other cities, particularly urban cities. What is Lauderhill going to do? This is fantastic that we're all talking and being a resource to one another. But I want to know, is there something in place? Is there a vision? Where are we headed? Because I voted for you, so where are we headed?
So, to your thing about the schools, so one of the things that notoriously has been bad is prevention about domestic violence. We do a great job of trying to we do an okay job, I would say a great job, because otherwise we wouldn't have as much domestic violence. We do an okay job of trying to get in front of the emergency when the emergency happens, but prevention is something that Florida, not Broward County, the state of Florida has not spent any real time or money putting money in. I will tell you that my budget when I started here in Florida, because I'm not originally from here, my original budget for prevention dollars was $25,000 on a $6 million budget. That's how much we were allocated for primary prevention. Down here in Broward, thankfully, We don't have that problem because I have a major donor that funds we have the largest prevention money in the state of Florida. Because we believe that prevention is how you stem domestic violence. We're in as many schools as we can possibly be. We start with elementary age children. We don't talk to elementary age kids about domestic violence, folks. We talk about bullying behaviors. We talk about positive behaviors. And as we get into junior high and high school, we start talking about dating behaviors and things that you need to do in that. But back to the point about resources, if I didn't go out and find a major donor that would pay for our primary prevention or our counseling, that's also something we get zero money for, just FYI, we would have no services. So in Broward, we're really lucky, but the rest of the state doesn't have any prevention or has very little. That doesn't even pay for a half of a person's salary. I can't pay somebody for that amount of money and get them into all the schools. So yes, we do need the resources. I would absolutely love to have prevention dollars that came down from the state of Florida and was a priority given for domestic violence. I think that's a great idea. So we work with the legislators because that's the reason we have to do that, and that's one of the bills that we're talking through this year with the state of Florida. To your point.
Thank you for that question. So I wanted to mention that we have our own in-house victim advocate unit. Reverend Catherine, who you all heard from before, she's that unit. Welcome, Nada. She's also a chaplain with the department. But as you heard earlier from State Attorney Pryor and Linda Parker, we work together in trying to find solutions to address domestic violence. One of the schools, Parkway Middle, mentioned them and give them their kudos. They're the ones that have this mentorship program, and I think that all schools should adopt this program. The counselor, who was a victim of violence herself, came up with it, and one of her reasons for coming up with this program was a lot of the kids that came to her and talked about the issues that they had at home, which I think is very important. And when they first started this program, and you can attest to this, she said there was a waiting list for the kids to have mentors. That should not be the case. So that really stuck with me, and that's why I stuck with the program. But we're open to anything, and that's why we reach out to State Attorney Pryor, who opened his door to let us have a meeting with him to discuss them. Dr. Parker, we're always trying to brainstorm and come up with ideas. Jamara, who you're all going to hear from earlier, I reach out to her anytime anything I need, she's available. So again, we have to use those resources. We appreciate the ideas because we can use them, and whatever we can do to make things better and make sure people are safe, we'll accept that. So thank you for your question.
I just want to add something too, in terms of what the chief was talking about, in terms of our collaborative efforts with other organizations. I appreciate that question because we work very closely with Women in Distress. We have a joint project with the State Attorney's Office, where there's an advocate from the State Attorney's Office that is connected with our team. So we're sharing information, we're reaching out to the victims here in Lauderhill. The other thing that we do proactively is that we review all reports of domestic violence, including domestic disturbances. So it's just a disturbance, no one's arrested, there's been no physical assault or battery, and it's all been verbal. We reach out to the folks involved, to both people involved in a domestic disturbance, offering them services to preempt a domestic violence situation. So it's within a couple of weeks of the domestic disturbance. If an officer sees something very serious, then they can reach out and they'll call us and we'll respond even quicker. But the vendors that are here in the other room, it's all part of the collaboration. United Way, Healing Arts Institute, Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies, Women in Distress. These are all the organizations that we collaborate with to serve all those that are suffering from different crimes, not just domestics, right? But it takes a multidisciplinary approach to provide the treatment, to provide the intervention, and to provide the prevention and education. So I just want to let you know what we're doing here in Lauderhill, which is really cutting edge. Because with our joint project with Women in Distress and the State Attorney's Office, we're even sharing a database of information. So, you know, we are doing it as best as we can, but of course we welcome any and other collaborations as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to take one more question right here. Yes, sir.
Focus. I didn't hear anyone talk about safe place. Because safe place, I mean, it's a place where
Safe Place, the Safe Place program. It's a program where you see right outside the public library, the fire station, the police station, like helping hands.
You're talking about the Miramar endeavor where the fire departments are considered safe. You can go there. Is that what you're talking about?
It's a countywide program.
Okay.
And it's a place where people of domestic violence, children that are in distress, LGBT kids, all that can go. We need to put that back into as far as public education, because you don't have to call 911. You can walk right into a police station. You can walk into a library. You can, go there and they'll send help to you immediately, as far as a counselor or whoever, to get you the help you need. Thank you. Very good point.
Before the mayor comes up to say a few words, just a show of hands, how many have not had lunch? Okay. For those that haven't had lunch, we're going to be, yes, Dr. Alexander, he's been back to back, he's been a trooper. After the mayor speaks, as we await the next panel, for those that haven't had lunch, it's going to be a lunch and learn for the next panel. So feel free to bring the food back. That's why you have tables there. All right? All are welcome at the table of God.
Thank you kindly, Chaplain. This has really been a very interesting and educational panel. Yes, in session. Please give them a hand. We have indeed learned a great deal and some terminologies and some verbiage that I will be utilizing as well. So thank you so much. And the whole discussion about the intergenerational issues and things that, even before the child is informed in the womb, there are issues that the mother deals with and are still dealing with, and as a result of that, it affects the child. And I don't think that oftentimes we spend enough time understanding that that is just as important. And so we are grateful for that type of conversation. When we were putting these panels together and these subject matters, it was important for us not to just deal with the physical, what we see on the outside. Because for me, being a Christian, I always believe that there are three components of healing. There is the spiritual side of things, and then we have the physical side of things, and then of course we have the soul, which is the mind, the heart, and your will, your emotions. And so if we don't deal with the soul issues, that's where all the issues of life lies, then really you'll just be having things that are just under the carpet and people will not be healed. So we'll just have real interesting conversations, and Bishop will be shouting in church, right? We'll be shouting in church and then go home to the same issues or dealing with the same issues. And then you have persons who are suffering in silence. They're suffering in silence. And just because a degree or your honorifics is attached to your name doesn't mean that you don't have issues. And you then, of course, the children that you are rearing will then be able to go through life with your issues in addition to the ones that they have now attached to themselves. Because people can sometimes be a product of their environment. So I think that this is perhaps one of the most important conversation for us to have today, dealing with this. But one of the greatest things that come out of this is that there is hope and there is help. And if you need help, you seek help. Because when something is revealed, that means it's time for it to be healed, right? And so this is the room that it begins with. And so we are so grateful for the opportunity to be able to not just have persons that have opinions, but persons who are experts in this industry, expert to deal with these matters that now have presented and are available to you if you need help. And so we thank you. I know the ICE subject, when you guys were talking about that, I was looking at the state attorney. I said, oh, Lord, we have to protect him, Jesus. Because it is one of those subjects that we're still trying to figure out. I, too, am from the island, born in Jamaica, been here since I was 9 years old, so I always say I'm more American than anything else. But nevertheless, I understand my culture and I love the culture. And I do have family members, in fact, 2 to date, that have been deported. Detained for months, not being able to communicate with their family members. And these are good people, but these are also persons that had a difficult time getting their papers or in the process thereof. But nevertheless, they are back in an island that they're not even accustomed to any longer. 13 years of not going back to Jamaica, and now you're dropped off. And you have to figure it out. Talk about trauma. And talk about now, how do you assimilate in that process? And who is your village to be able to help you during that time? And so this is why these sort of conversations are important. It's not just for you to hear. It's for you to retain, for you to be able to gather the information so then you too can educate someone in part and convey to those who are in need. And I will say thank you again for being here, taking time out of your busy schedule to be able to engage us and to listen so we can take back to the community, because indeed this is going to be a collective effort, all of us working together to make Lauderhill a better place. Indeed? So, breaking the cycle of violence, and thank you again to our moderator, Dr. Cedric Alexander. Isn't he brilliant? You don't even know what you got. We're talking about CNN, MSNBC, Fox, C-SPAN, all of them. And he said yes. Yes, he said yes to Lauderhill. Please give him a hand for saying yes to Lauderhill and coming here and moderating this morning 2 sessions. We thank you, sir. And I hope that this will be a continued relationship. Thank you. In addition to that, to say thank you, of course, to our Broward State Attorney, Mr. Pryor, who had so much on his plate, hundreds of thousands of cases. And he took some time out to grace us with his presence and to be here. And he is a powerful speaker, isn't he? Oh, man, a wealth of knowledge. And I do agree with you, Ms. Lynch, when you do say that he's indeed the right man for the job. So thank you for understanding and having the empathy and knowing the community as well. And of course, Ruth Carter Lynch, who I call her doctor. I think I'm being prophetic here when I keep saying it, because every time I think of you, I say it. And of course, you guys know her. She is a political individual, community leader, as well as an educational consultant. And I know her very well in terms of her work, what she does at Parkway Middle School and the mentorship program. Stella, top of the line. And we thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. And that statement that your grandfather made, he said, what did he say? He said, you ain't saying nothing but just talking. Yes. So we want to be able to sign on the front of the check, right? Yes, so thank you so much, Ms. Lynch, and as well as thank you to Dr. Parker, Women in Distress. We do appreciate your efforts. We see you quite often at our city commission meetings, and you're there to present and to give us all of the information having to do with what the organization is doing, in particular in the city of Lauderhill. And we will continue, along with our city manager and the commission, to continue to support what you're doing. Of course, Danielle Doss as well, Second Chance Society. We thank you very much for being here and being a part of that the conversation and being able to give us some good information as well to take away. And of course, Ms. McDonald, United Way of Broward County. United Way of Broward County. We thank you very much for that. Great information, excellent stuff. And of course, the Bishop Doctor. You're also a doctor, right? Dr. Lewis, yes. Bishop, and not just a doctor. Tell us what you have your doctorate in.
It's basically dealing with community development.
Yes.
And working in the areas of bridging the gap between the church and the community.
Yes.
That's the foundation.
Wonderful. And so Community Church of God, which is located in the city of Lauderhill, right across the street from the school, Lauderhill 6 through 12. And so I have visited Bishop Lewis's church many times, and he is very much engaged in the community. He does have a program having to do with single mothers. They give them resources, education that's necessary to be able to help their family, and they feed the children and they feed the community. And we thank you for all that you do, sir. So, thank you again for being here. We appreciate it. We will take some pictures and get some lunch and come back. And come back for the next session, which will be Voices from the Front Line. Thank you.
If you haven't had lunch, once again, there is lunch in the back.